everybody. I'm Penny Mabey. I am a facilitator, and tonight I'm facilitating this meeting, and my real job is to make sure we start on time, which we're doing, and we end on time. And we're going till like 11:30, right? Yeah. Okay. So, and I like to make sure that we stay on agenda, and that we get, when we get there, we get an opportunity for good Q&A. So just a couple of housekeeping things. Number one, the restrooms, always an important thing, are behind you all, back by the entry door, boys and girls, men's and women's, left and right. And if you go in the women's, be sure and look at the mirror because it says you are powerful, brave, and brilliant. I did not enter into the men's to see what it says there. Somebody will have to scout that for me. Yeah. And if we need to make an emergency exit out of this building for any reason, thank gosh we don't live in tornado land, right? There's emergency, we'll go right back out the door that we came in, or we can always go up and go out that way. I do that every meeting. I've been doing that for 20 years, and I've never had to make an emergency exit yet. And so now I've decided that if I ever forget it, that's when something bad's gonna happen, so. Okay, I did want to recognize, I believe we have a couple of school board members here. Dee Clark is here. Yep, there you are. Okay, Paul Williams is over there. Okay, thank you. And I think Deb Norris, who's one on the school board and was also one of the task force members, is here. There's Deb. And she's walking around much better than at the beginning of the task force work. And then over at the table here, we have Lori Dent, our superintendent for the Sumner-Bonney Lake School District. Can you guess which one is Lori? I think so. And Matt Gilanians. I think I said it right. Did I say it right? Yeah, you should see how it's spelled. You think it's hard to say. He's with Hainline, and also where's Chuck? And Chuck Hartung right here is also with Hainline, and you're going to be hearing from Matt tonight. And when we get to Q&A, you may also hear from Chuck. So what are we about tonight? You're going to get a relatively brief presentation about what's been going on with Sumner High School, and a little bit of background, and then what's happened over the last couple of months, a lot of hard work, and then what this task force that was convened, what they've come up with in terms of their recommendations for how the path forward for Sumner High School should proceed. Then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions of all three of the panelists. And that will be that. And then you'll have the opportunity to do a survey. You've got a couple of choices about how to do it. You can do it on paper. It'll be over at our comment table over there. You can do it right here if you want to, or you can take it home with you and do it. We'd rather you do it here if you're going to do it on paper. You can do it on the laptops. We have it lined up tonight, so you can sit right there and do the survey tonight so you don't forget about it. Or there's a URL on the fact sheet, which you hopefully picked up at the sign-in table, and you can go home and do it at whenever you would like to, at your convenience, or even on your mobile if you want to. So many different ways that you can take that survey, but that's what we're asking for, is for your input on the task force recommendations. So there's some questions there about the recommendations. I think that's about as much introduction as I'm going to do, and so I'm going to turn it over to Lori and let her tell you what the background is.
We do want to welcome you here tonight, and we're glad you're here. Thanks for coming out on a beautiful night. It's nice to see you, a lot of familiar faces. It's even nice to see some of my former students that I had when they were just wee little ones, and now they're getting bigger. But it is nice to see when you're a former principal and now you're a superintendent that you still have kids coming through, matriculating through the system. But we are glad you're here. A lot of hard work has gone in tonight, and we're excited to show you the fruit of that work. Creating our legacy is a theme that we purposefully used for this task force because Sumner High School is special to this community. A lot of you are Sumner High School grads. There's a lot of Sumner High School alumni in this area, and it's a very, very special place to this community. And we wanted to make sure that we honor that legacy and that we continue to build upon that legacy. So our task force took this seriously, and we wanted to make sure that any of the work that we did together collaboratively continue to honor this legacy and build on it. So this was the filter that we put in front of us every single time to make sure that this legacy that we built on continued. because Sumner High School is a very, very special place, and we want it to continue to become a special place for many, many years to come. In 2016, our taxpayers gifted us with a $145.6 million bond. From that, we were able to construct 9 school projects, including Sumner High School. 8 are underway or completed, and let's take a look at the progress of those. To Hawley Heights Elementary. Have any of you seen that building? It's gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. It's our 9th elementary, and it's completed. Little feet are running around that elementary, and it is it's astonishing. It's a beautiful, beautiful STEM-focused elementary. Bonnie Lake High School now has new covered seating. If you've had the pleasure of sitting through a soccer game or some sort of event in the covered seating, I'm sure that you're enjoying that. The Performing Arts Center that's at Bonnie Lake High School is almost ready. It's going to be completed this summer, 2019. Again, another beautiful facility. Emerald Hills Elementary is going to be replaced. Yes, going to be gorgeous, beautiful view, one of the most beautiful views in the district. The Early Learning Center, which is right behind us, is also going to be a fabulous building, and it's going to be for our PK students. It's going to open this fall. It should be great to see our little ones fill that building. Our Sumner Middle School track and field, it was completed, and on any given day you'll see even our community members walking around the track using it. Our Lake Ridge Middle School track and field was completed in the winter of 2018, and Tim, we're just about to finish that. Yeah, we're just about to finish the whole project. And Mountain View Middle School is, we're going to add some classrooms and complete that track and field project. We're in the planning phase of that, and we're hoping to get that going here pretty soon, and the track and field should be open around 2020. So all of these projects are completed or in progress or in the planning phase, and we are just so excited to have all of these projects from the bond that was gifted to us in 2016. And then there's the Sumner High School project. The 2016 bond goals included additional classrooms, new library, additional gym seating, a new commons and cafeteria, new restrooms, technology, security. However, the as-bid design came in about $14 million over budget. So, bravely, our board rejected the only bid that came in. And they directed me to form a task force, hire a construction management firm to study and evaluate all different options that were available to us to make sure that we continue the legacy that is so important to us in this community and build Sumner High School in the way that it should be built. Our task force was formed of industry experts. And if you are a part of that task force, would you just stand for a second and be recognized? Because you gave of your time. Yeah, give them a round of applause. It's awesome that they're even here tonight. And Deb, we know you're standing back there. And Penny's right. She scooted herself in after breaking her leg. It was crazy, right? She's awesome, though. They met 4 times over 2 months. And again, this was the first time in the district's history that we formed a task force of industry experts. These are people that were civil engineers, architects, construction managers who really understood how to look at a piece of land and understood how to look at massing and mezzanines and chiller farms. Boy, it was really fascinating to listen to them talk about options, and I learned a lot just listening to them talk. So it was great to form this task force. But then we also hired a construction management firm to help us evaluate the options. And Matt is here as part of that team, along with Chuck, to talk to us about the work they did to study and evaluate all of the different options and to present them to the task force. So Matt, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Take that. I need 3 hands. Get this cheese and cracker wrapper off the ground.
Well, it's middle school,
Pleasure,
man.
yeah,
You know? See, I just look right past it. I'm used to it.
Before I get started, I just, personal note, I've worked in a lot of places and a lot of organizations, and want to thank Lori and the school board. In a challenging time, you came together and focused on the future, which is not something all teams do. There's no internal blaming. Brought this task force together, which was also a very unique and special experience. I recommend asking the task force members about that experience. And I was honored to be a part of it. So I just, if I get really close, I can.
Yeah, that's right, that's what we wanted.
Oh, okay. So the world has changed a little bit from when the bond passed. I want to talk about some of those circumstances that we used to guide this effort with the task force. I think everybody here knows that we're in an overheated construction market. Even if you just wanted to get blinds measured up or a patio built, it's quite crazy right now, and it's been crazy for several years. There's nothing really anybody can do about the price of construction, but what the task force did and the guidance and recommendations they're putting forward, they're focused on providing something that makes contractors want to build this project, something that is easy to build, something that we can get contractors interested and want to compete against each other to provide a price for. And that's a very important consideration and something that was always overarching when we were coming up with concepts as a task force. City parking and regulatory requirements. Now, when the bond was conceived, like when the ideas came to be, there's no way to really know what the city's requirements are going to be. You have to go through something called the conditional use permit process for that. And of course, you know there's going to be something. But in this case, the city rightly wanted lighting changes, wanted frontage improvements with curbs and sidewalks, ADA, and those add up. So those were never even considered in the budget originally. So that was kind of a changed circumstance post-bond. The complexity and associated expense of working in a live school. Now, of course, we always knew we were going to work in a live school, but until you get into the nuts and bolts and meet with Cassie and walk through, okay, how are you going to get students safely from science over to culinary arts and then over to the gym and tear half this building down and have jackhammers and moving material? It's quite complex. So once you get into the nuts and bolts and you specifically write those restrictions onto a bid for a contractor, you really can't know the price of that. Then that also applies to the utilities and the infrastructure within the building. You know where the mechanical systems are, but until you get the engineer to actually figure out how to get the power from here to there temporarily for these few months, and then from there to here permanently after that, that's when the real cost of that complexity becomes known. And then, of course, many of you may know, and I'll point them out on the map later, the district acquired several properties on North Mason, and that sort of has changed the site in that it allows for opportunities that didn't exist when the bond was passed. So this is called the two-phased approach, but basically it means let's get something built with the money we have from the bond. This young man looks like he's ready to go to a nice high school. Maybe in a couple of years? Yeah, okay. So you don't have to say anything. This is okay. So, so we're gonna make the most of the bond money available to us. And the best way to get value for money is to really build new. Anytime you remodel, anytime you tear into a wall that hasn't been touched since 1968 or 75, you never know what you're gonna find. And costs add up, complexity adds up, changes add up. Whereas building new on sort of an empty piece of land, it's far less risk for the contractor, better access. So that's one part of the first phase approach we're calling the initial phase. So we're going to retain most or all of the existing buildings, again, because touching old buildings is expensive, and limit remodeling to the extent we can. There's some things you have to do, but we're going to try to keep it as minimal as possible. So what's going to be in this initial phase? So a lot of the things that were in the bond, new classrooms, specifically 8 new science classrooms, which are sorely needed, and then as many additional classrooms as we can fit into the design within the budget. Additional to that, a new commons and cafeteria. I see many familiar faces in here, but if you've never been to the high school at power hour or lunchtime, it is, no offense, Cassie's team does great. They've got radios that run around, who's got what covered, and who's got the parking lot, who's got this wing. But it's still a zoo. There's just so many bodies trying to get fed and from point A to B to C in a short amount of time. and new classrooms, new commons and cafeteria will alleviate that. And a new kitchen, of course, with the commons and cafeteria. A new library, and of course, improved circulation and restroom security and technology. So, I mean, it goes without saying, when you build a new building, it's gonna have code-required restrooms and up-to-date technology. And, Lori's formed a security committee that's got recommendations. Those will get incorporated in terms of keeping the kids' safety in mind as the design goes forward. So that's the first phase. Sorry again, I need an extra hand. The second phase is the master plan approach. Now, the master plan is important in that when we came up with the concept for the initial phase, one thing we always wanted was to make sure that whatever we built with the bond money made sense for a future overall master plan, okay? You could build the first phase, but then it constricts you in a master plan. You have to make sacrifices in the future, and that's not something we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that whatever we built now, okay, and then when you go to build a fully built out Sumner High School in the future, no one's walking around going, how did this happen, right? You want it to make sense, you want it to flow, okay? And that impacts design, location, entry, parking, drop off, all those considerations. Those are all things we considered as part of the master plan. So we're gonna complete the facilities and then demolish the rest of the old school, which I know some people find nostalgic, but they just haven't walked through it recently. Complete the parking and the site work, obviously. And so what is in this master plan? It's all the so whatever classrooms we couldn't build in the initial phase, they'll get built out in the master plan. The CT and FFA will get addressed in the master plan to get new facilities. Arts, music, and drama obviously need a permanent home. And if you've ever seen the band or the choir, they're just incredible. I mean, Sumner's got some great programs, and they deserve a good home. Athletic facilities, obviously, and administration and student services, they're cramped. It's an odd space, so that'll get addressed in the master plan, and any support services, janitorial, and all that. So basically think of the initial phase as what we can do to address the needs now that give you a commons and a cafeteria that will meet your growth requirements, that will give the students a safe, clean, light space to learn in. Okay, and the master plan is all the other programs and the rest of the educational programs when we can build it. Most of you are familiar with the school, but I just wanted to, most of you don't spend all day looking at Google Maps, which seems like what I've done the last few weeks. This is the site. And I just want to note to you, these properties here along the north are the ones that were acquired post-bond passage. And this one, currently there are discussions and may be acquired, but is not yet. So you can see this is quite a bit of space out to this direction's east, that direction's west. There's a lot of space out here to the west that wasn't available at the time of the bond passage. This is the old school, obviously, CT and FFA here. This is the pool, the gym, sort of the core educational section, the PAC, and then the commons and the admin here. So let's talk about the initial phase concept. But actually, I'm gonna take that away. Take that out of your mind for a second. When you're done with this and you go to the boards and the stations, there's a board directly behind you that's got several photos in it, okay? And those are just the ones that made it to the task force. Chuck, being a former architect, and myself pretending to be an architect, we came up with twice that many designs, maybe more, that just didn't make sense, and we never presented them. But we had to try, okay, does this fit here? What if we do that? Let's try this crazy idea. But ultimately, those are the ones we presented to the task force, and the one we're presenting to you today is the one the task force decided was what they wanted to recommend to the board to go forward. And so what we've done here is we've gone west. Okay, there's a very large practice field here. This isn't the main softball field. This is the main softball field. And it's flat, and it's open, and it's got views of Mount Rainier from a certain height, and it's very visible from Main Street. So we decided this is where the initial phase should start and will be the seed for a master plan Sumner High School. What you have here is a 3-story, could be 2, but we're hoping for 3-story classroom wing with a library in it. So this will be the main educational building for the school once the initial phase is complete, and then a modern commons with a kitchen behind it. Now, why is the kitchen behind it? These are the kinds of things that drive design and design decisions. A kitchen needs service. You need to deliver food, supplies, whatnot to a kitchen. You don't want to go through student circulation areas to get your supplies to the kitchen, right? Now, in order to do that, you have to come off a street. We went into this level of detail for every aspect. I'm just giving one that, it's easy to relate to. You don't want to come off of Main Street. You don't want to see the back of a kitchen off of Main Street, right? You don't want it to compete with drop-off in the front of the school and people going into admin. So it's really got to kind of face Mason, North Mason. And so, that's why the kitchen is on that side of the commons, for example. So when you think about design, these are the things we've considered when we came up with this recommendation as a task force. And in order to get students from the old school to the new school, there will be a covered walkway, and there will be no traffic from the north to the south to make sure that they're safe, okay? And in order to ensure safety, since they will be out in the open here, we're also looking at potential fencing considerations along the south side, just to make sure nobody, that everyone stays where they're supposed to be and no one comes where they're not supposed to be. And of course, this will have all the restrooms and security. There'll be a secure vestibule, and technology it's a given. It'll be part of the program. This is exciting for a few reasons. One is, like I said, there should be views from Mount Rainier on the second and third floor here. Second is it gets, we considered things in here and here, but they were very expensive because of the remodel. We considered this parking lot, but the problem with the parking lot is you lose the parking, first of all. It gets you very close to the school, so you're disturbed. This is the daycare where the tiny sparks spend their days. And there's other programs right in this area. So when you're driving piles and running equipment and have backup beeping, alarms beeping, and just general construction noise, it's going to be very disturbing to the educational experience. Plus, it restricts a side that the contractor can get access to the building to. Whereas going out west takes care of all of those issues. So with this plan, these houses, once they're demolished, can serve as a staging area for the contractor to have his equipment and his parking for his people. They've got easy access to the construction site from all the way around, and so that's for construction. And then from a public perception point of view, we didn't want to bury the school back here. You wanted something you were proud of as a community. So you come down Main Street, it's right there. That's going to be an icon of the community that everyone is going to see, and it's going to be front and center and beautiful. Okay, this is a busy map. Okay, but the next phase, right? The master plan concept, the build out of the school. You see here, these are the parts we're building in the initial phase. And of course, the size or the shape of the buildings might change as we go into design. This is really conceptual. But what the task force wanted, the intent of this was, ultimately, you end up with a new Sumner High School on the west side of the current campus. So you build out the rest of your educational facilities here, service and other support spaces, a beautiful entry courtyard that retains that open space feel you currently get from your softball field. We don't want to lose that. When you come around that corner, the softball field is there, it's green, it really feels good. And so it naturally lent itself to become a future sort of grand courtyard for the school. And it's also south facing, so it's going to be sunny. It's going to be a nice gathering place right out in front of the commons where students can spill out and enjoy nature, sort of. And then the CT and FFA, which has specific needs, shop and wood shop and construction. They're sort of up here on North Mason Street, which felt like a natural spot for it. Moving the tennis courts over a bit and getting more of them. This shaded area sort of leaves room for 6. And then parking, music and arts. You have parking on the west side. And music and arts here is close to the PAC. And what this does is it leaves options, right? You can leave the PAC as it is or remodel it. You can make a new PAC. You can do a new gym. You can leave the gym as it is and build a main gym. And then you have all this parking on the east side where the old school was. And if you can imagine from a design standpoint, it bifurcates the site into sort of the academic half and the athletic half, which is really nice for design. Modern high schools are designed this way. And so you're not, just imagine if you're an athlete, I know, okay, I park here, I go to school, I go do my sports, then I get back in my car and I go, right? It just makes sense from a flow perspective versus, some softball players went this way, baseball players went this way. Now the softball field sort of relocated to where the portables are now. So you can have maybe it wouldn't be oriented this way, maybe the diamonds would be back to back, but the point is you have a softball, baseball complex to the north. And that really is the master plan concept for how the initial phase fits into a future Sumner High School. I forget you're doing this. So, sorry, before I bring Penny up, I just want to say, personally, I hadn't had experience with Sumner until I came down here, but after meeting the team and the people at the high school, they deserve a good facility. I mean, the people are great, the students are great, everyone's so polite. They're really passionate about their activities and their education. We look in this space, it's a beautiful space for learning. Sumner High School deserves the same, and I hope we move forward and the board follows the task force's recommendations and we build this. It'll be a beautiful place. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I was the facilitator for the task force. So I worked with Matt and Chuck and with Lori to say, what will the task force do each meeting? How do we bring them along? How do we get them to their recommendations and so forth? So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what did the task force say about all this, because Matt presented it from kind of the conceptual design perspective, but I want to talk just a tiny little bit about how they got there. So as Matt said, they started by looking at some concepts and looked at more concepts and more and more and more, and we're identifying things and issues and concerns and questions and so forth through each of those sets of concepts. Some of the things that as they got to their recommendations, we wanted to make sure were very clear were some assumptions that they were operating under as they got to their recommendations. So there's a couple of big ones. One is that, and Matt alluded to it, both the initial phase and the master plan are both just conceptual designs. They're essentially blocks on a piece of paper. There's no detail to them, and there's a very good likelihood that things will change from this conceptual design or conceptual drawings to actual design as things get dug into. Things like, where do the ADA access needs to be? What kind of requirements will the city provide for parking and site development? How can they best organize things to get the maximum amount of construction assistance from the state? That's the state match funding. There will probably be physical constraints that haven't been thought of yet. Building code requirements, because the building codes change all the time. So you can start a project and plan it, 4 years ago. By the time you actually get to the point where you're going to build it, things have changed. As Matt said, they're still working on getting that remaining parcel on Mason Street. And once this moves forward, if it moves forward, there will be a whole bond planning effort. Because with all of those assumptions in mind and a couple of others that aren't up there, the other thing that the task force did not do was they did not put any kind of budget recommendations in any kind of budget guidance in their recommendations. They said, in the first phase, the initial phase, as Matt said, let's use the money that was in the 2016 bond for the high school and get as much as can be done with that money. And so they have a pretty good plan for that initial phase. And then the master phase will require, in their recommendations, it will require additional bond funding. It's not funded at this time. So they didn't say how much it will be. All of that will have to be figured out as things move forward. So if you're looking for a budget recommendation, that's not what they did. They really focused on the site. How can they get all the programs in, make the best use of the land, make the best use of the resources, and as Matt said, do it in the most affordable in terms of construction, because that was their expertise, design and construction, in the most affordable way possible. So those are kind of the assumptions that I wanted you to think about. And then they came up with recommendations. Matt talked about them a bit as he went, but they looked at looking to the east, they looked at looking at central, they looked at looking to the west, and finally said, let's go to the west. So that's one of their recommendations. and put this initial phase out westerly. They have to tell you, they looked at this initial phase in a lot of different places before they landed on the west. And then they said, let's adopt a master plan so that the future build out makes sense. And so that what we do in the first phase, as Matt said, makes sense in the context of the future plan. And they agreed with Matt and Chuck and said, minimize remodeling to the most extent practical, because remodeling old buildings is expensive. So here's some specifics about their recommendations. They said, looking at the 2016 bond goals, let's do that in the first phase. So new classrooms, their target is 16 to 20 classrooms, the new commons and cafeteria, the new kitchen, the new library, improved circulation. And all of that, as Matt said, comes along with the restrooms, security features, technology, all of that will be built to current standards. And then they said, request bond funding for the future build out of the master plan, and here's the big urgency. They said as soon as possible. They don't want to build the first part, see the first part built, and then wait 5 or 10 years before the rest of the high school gets built. So their recommendation is to seek bond funding to build the rest of the master plan as soon as possible. So their recommendations have been summarized in a report, have been captured in a report, not really summarized. And I think it's online, and if it's not online, it will be soon. Right, where's Elle? Is the report online yet? Yes, it is. So the recommendations report is online. So what are the next steps? You get to provide input on their recommendations through that survey, and so does the rest of the community, because it's open to everybody. Then the superintendent will go to the school board, having looked at the recommendations from the task force, having looked at all the input from the community. She will go to the school board on June 18th and make her recommendation for what the path forward for Sumner High School should be. The school board will then adopt or modify Lori's recommendations, again, in light of all these different circumstances and conditions that, as Matt talked about, a lot of things have changed since 2016. And then after that, they will identify the next steps that they're going to take to modernize and expand Sumner High School as soon as reasonably possible. So that's the path forward now, the recommended path forward from the task force, and what happens next. So by June 18th, and June 18th would be a very interesting board meeting to go to. Where are our board members here? It's going to be an interesting meeting, right? Yeah, so if you have the chance, you should go to it. June 18th will be a big day for the future of Sumner High School.